Tonight, the Dow takes a nosedive. Banks are losing billions on bad loans and making up for it by jacking up rates on credit cards. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, closing the confidence gap. The president tells the cabinet, start cutting their budgets, then visits the CIA to boost morale in the wake of the waterboarding controversy. The mystery at the polo championship. Why did 21 horses drop dead, many in front of stunned spectators? Plus, Columbine, 10 years later, some students are now teaching there and passing on the lessons they've learned.
I think just the humanity part of Columbine is what I try to bring to my kids, that do be kind to one another.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Wall Street had been on a 6-week winning streak, but today it suffered its worst drop in 2 months as investors rushed to sell bank stocks. The Dow lost about 290 points today, more than 3.5%. The sell-off came after Bank of America reported earnings of more than $2.8 billion last quarter. But that good news was offset by word that the bank has set aside more than $13 billion to cover its losses from bad loans made in the past. Many banks are piling up red ink from credit cards, and consumers are paying the price. Here's Anthony Mason.
For banks, plastic has become a problem. As unemployment is soaring, so are the bank's losses on credit card debt.
The banking system cannot sustain the pace of loan losses that we're seeing today.
The loss rate for credit card loans that banks have given up on has reached a record 8.4%. For 3 of the country's financial giants, Citigroup, American Express, and Bank of America, it's more than 9%. To cover those losses, banks are jacking up rates and fees. 4 million Bank of America cardholders will see their interest rates jump into double digits in June.
What's that going to do to people's borrowing power?
It's a disaster.
Credit.com's Adam Levin says their survey found a third of borrowers say their credit card company has made changes to their account, either by increasing their interest rate or their minimum payment, reducing their credit limit, or closing their account entirely.
The financial services industry isn't really doing a heck of a lot to help out. As a matter of fact, I think they're making it worse. The kinds of pressures they're putting on are suffocating people.
New rules are on the books to limit rate increases, but they don't go into effect until 2010. President Obama is now backing Congress's effort to move up that timetable. Administration officials will meet with the heads of 14 credit card companies this week. The White House says consumers are getting hit by fines they can't find in the fine print.
You turn it over on the back and it's writing that you wouldn't even have your eye doctor use in your eye test.
With bank losses on bad credit card loans up nearly 50% over the past year, it's estimated the banks will cut limits on credit cards for consumers by $2.7 trillion, Katie.
And Anthony, it doesn't seem fair because many of these banks took taxpayer bailout dollars, and now they're turning around and penalizing a lot of taxpayers, and some of whom who pay their credit card bills on time, right?
Correct. Well, the banks are desperate, Katie. But of course, this is really hurting people, especially people who are already in trouble, who may have lost their job, for whom credit cards were kind of the last safety net. This is why the president is getting involved, and the White House said tonight the president will, in fact, himself be at the meeting on Thursday with credit card executives.
All right, Anthony Mason. Anthony, thank you as always. Saving money was on President Obama's mind today as he held his first formal cabinet meeting today and challenged them to cut their budgets. But critics say the amounts are so small it's nothing more than a publicity stunt. Here's our chief White House correspondent, Chip Reed.
In a meeting with his cabinet today, the president ordered department heads to find $100 million in budget cuts to help close what he called a confidence gap with the American people.
We've got to earn their trust. They've got to feel confident that their dollars are being spent wisely.
He said he wants more streamlining, like the $18 million the Veterans Affairs Department is already saving by video conferencing, and the $52 million Homeland Security hopes to save by purchasing office supplies in bulk. The president admitted $100 million is a drop in the budget bucket, but insisted there's a lot more cutting to come.
$100 million there, $100 million here. Pretty soon, even in Washington, it adds up to real money.
On Capitol Hill, though, Republicans ridiculed the proposal. $100 million, they noted, is about 2/1,000ths of 1% of the $3.9 trillion budget. And they say it's what the government spends every day just on interest on the president's $787 billion stimulus.
I would just like to see the president use some of his popularity to do something serious about spending.
A comparable cut for a family with a budget of $75,000 would be about $1.50. Government watchdog Dan Mitchell says that with the deficit now over $1 trillion, the president's proposal amounts to little more than a PR stunt.
We have giant gaping wounds that need to be fixed, and the president is giving us a tiny, tiny little Band-Aid.
Now, White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said today that $100 million may not sound like much money to people here in this town, but it is a lot of money to people out beyond the Washington Beltway, Katie.
Meanwhile, Chip, I know there were some pretty stunning revelations in recently released government memos that showed 2 key al-Qaeda prisoners were waterboarded something like 266 times, a lot more than previously thought. Did that have any impact on the president's decision to visit the CIA today?
It did not, Katie. He had been previously scheduled to go there, but it did influence what he said, I believe, because he talked quite a bit about why he banned waterboarding himself, also talked about why he released those memos last week detailing what happened. And as you can see, he was received like a rock star there. It was like a campaign event complete with screaming fans, and he told them that he had come to boost their sagging morale.
I believe that our nation is stronger and more secure when we deploy the full measure of both our power and the power of our values, including the rule of law.
So there have been some tensions between the president and the CIA recently, but they appear to be, for now, back on track. Katie?
Chip Reed reporting from the White House tonight. Thank you. Tonight, the U.S. is slamming the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, for a speech one diplomat called vile and hateful. Dozens of diplomats walked out of a UN conference on racism in Geneva today when Ahmadinejad called Israel, quote, a cruel and repressive racist regime. Earlier, 2 protesters threw clown noses at him. The U.S. and several allies, including Canada, Britain, and Germany, are already boycotting the conference. Meanwhile, in a surprising move, Iran's president has joined legal experts around the world saying an Iranian-American reporter convicted of spying for the United States and sentenced to 8 years should be allowed full legal rights when the case is appealed. Today's Iran's judicial chief ordered an investigation. More now from Elizabeth Palmer.
Roxana Sabari grew up in the Midwest, the daughter of a Japanese mother and an Iranian father. In 1997, she was crowned Miss North Dakota. But 6 years ago, she moved to Tehran to freelance as a journalist.
Afghan President Hamid Karzai was also scheduled.
Then suddenly, 3 months ago, Sabari was arrested. And this past weekend, she was sentenced to 8 years in jail for spying.
She cannot be a spy. You know her. Once you know her, she is the last person to do that.
Both her parents traveled to Tehran and were allowed to see Roxana in prison. But even her family hasn't seen the case against Roxana. Charges that in 3 months escalated from buying alcohol, a crime in Iran, to working without a press card, and now finally espionage. Her trial behind closed doors lasted just a few hours, raising suspicions that the case is politically motivated.
She is now a pawn in the international power game, and she will continue to be. So I think international pressure continues to be important.
Today, there was a renewed demand by America for Sabari's release.
She should be freed immediately, that the charges against her are baseless.
Several Iranian officials, including the president, have now recommended that Sabari's case be reviewed, raising hopes that she may be released on appeal. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.
Now to New Orleans, where for the first time today, Hurricane Katrina victims have put the Army Corps of Engineers on trial. 6 plaintiffs are seeking up to $2.4 million in damages in a lawsuit that could grow into the biggest ever against the federal government. Here's our chief investigative correspondent, Armin Katayan.
Gone. The salt water just ate it up.
For Anthony Franz and wife Lucille, this house was a treasured family heirloom.
I was born in 1929 and came to this house. This was my first home from the hospital.
Then in August 2005, Hurricane Katrina tore it apart, burying their home in more than 10 feet of water.
And now, at 80 years old, I got to find another place to die.
Now they are part of potentially a groundbreaking lawsuit centering on the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, a 76-mile waterway built by the Army Corps of Engineers in the 1960s. Known as the Mr. Go, it's a shortcut for ships between New Orleans and the Gulf of Mexico.
It's the most expensive catastrophe in United States history. It's actually man-made.
Attorneys for the victims will argue the Corps was negligent in constructing and maintaining the outlet, creating, in effect, a hurricane highway. First, wetlands and wooded forests that served as natural flood barriers were destroyed, and a faulty design created a funnel effect, accelerating the force and strength of the storm surge, leading to the collapse of the levees and the drowning of the city of New Orleans.
This wouldn't have happened if the Corps had done their job properly.
There's also the question whether the Corps ignored repeated warnings, like this 1957 report stating in a hurricane the existence of the channel will be in enormous danger. The government contends Katrina was an overwhelming event it had no control over. In addition, it argues the Corps is immune from liability for projects it constructs.
The complex trial before a single federal judge is expected to last upwards of a month. If the plaintiffs prevail, the floodgates could open for as many as 200,000 other victims of Hurricane Katrina. Armin Katayan, CBS News, New Orleans.
And coming up next, right here on the CBS Evening News, the king of earmarks. We follow the money flowing from John Murtha's congressional office. As Congress gets back to work this week, members are sending in their earmark requests for next year's budget. That includes one powerful, high-ranking Democrat connected to people and companies whose campaign contributions are now being investigated by the FBI. In the new budget, he could be giving his critics some fresh ammunition. Cheryl Atkinson follows the money.
Spring in Washington is earmark season, a busy time for Congressman John Murtha.
That's my business. You control it. I've been in it 35 years.
As head of a powerful defense committee, Murtha controls hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, and he's not shy about directing money to those who give generously to his election campaigns. CBS News has learned that this month, Murtha is steering new earmarks toward 10 companies that recently donated to his campaign. Murtha wants $8 million for Argonne ST, a defense contractor whose CEO gave Murtha the maximum allowed by law. He's directing a $5 million earmark toward Advanced Acoustic Concepts, which also gave the max to his campaign. In all, 10 recent Murtha donors are slated to receive $31 million in Murtha earmarks for 2010. Taxpayer watchdogs may not like how it looks, but it's not against the law unless donations were required in order to receive the earmarks. Looking for evidence of wrongdoing, the FBI recently raided offices of 2 other companies linked to Murtha.
The sooner it gets to a bright line that's a direct connection of you give me money, you open an office, and you're going to get taxpayer dollars, that's when you really cross the line.
That line was crossed in one case, according to a defense contractor who spoke to us on condition of anonymity for fear of losing government contracts. The contractor was set to receive $1 million tax dollars. He says the military told him the money would come through a company called Commonwealth Research Institute, whose parent company ranked among the largest earmark recipients. Both were set up with Murtha's help in his own hometown. The defense contractor says Commonwealth officials told him to get the money, he should consider opening an office in Murtha's hometown, and chided his company for not giving enough campaign contributions to Murtha and not making a showing at Murtha's annual defense contractor fair. The contractor told CBS News, "I wouldn't do it. We're just not going to play." He didn't get the funds. You called this a shakedown.
If you want the money, then you've got to do these things, and that's being shaken down.
Is there anything illegal about that?
Illegality is a tricky thing on this. It's very hard to ever prove a quid pro quo because most of these things aren't written down.
Commonwealth, subpoenaed in a separate federal probe, would only say it's always encouraged companies to relocate to Johnstown, Murtha's hometown, and attend Murtha's fair to promote growth, but does not encourage anyone to make campaign contributions. Murtha wouldn't comment for our report. He did recently tell a home state newspaper that he's only trying to bring home the bacon.
We decide where it goes. That's exactly right.
If I'm corrupt, said the congressman, it's because I take care of my district. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
And when we come back, mystery in Palm Beach. 21 polo horses dropped dead at a match, and no one knows why. This week's U.S. Open Polo Championship in Palm Beach is the biggest event in that high society sport. But today, it's getting attention for a very different reason. Authorities are probing why 21 horses suddenly collapsed and died over the weekend. Here's Kelly Kobiella.
In the exclusive world of professional polo, this was a disaster like no one had ever seen. One after another, 7 horses fell to the ground in front of fans, waiting for Sunday's quarterfinal match at the International Polo Club in Palm Beach County.
There were 2 or 3 of them that were a little off balanced and looked like they were having a little bit of difficulty. And within an hour, I would say, or half an hour from there, the horses started dropping.
Veterinarians were unable to save a single sick horse. By Monday morning, 21 were dead, all of them from the same Venezuelan team.
It's just so sad. I mean, you have to understand the sport of polo. I mean, these horses are wonderful athletes.
The animals were housed here for the last 6 months at the team stables for Lechuza Caracas polo team. Handlers told veterinarians the horses received vitamins, nothing else, before the match. They were worth nearly $2 million, a devastating blow to team owner Victor Vargas and his players.
In Wellington, we lost 21 family members.
Still, some in this horse-loving community are hoping the horses weren't pushed too hard for a win.
You know, you never know if it's tainted inside or something. You don't know what's going on.
The tournament has been put on hold until midweek, while experts in Central Florida try to figure out what killed so many so quickly. The stands may be quiet here, but fans are still buzzing. Rumors are flying about what happened here Sunday, and they're not likely to die down until Friday at the earliest. That's when test results are due back. Kelly Kobiella, CBS News, Wellington, Florida.
In other news, a possible break in what's become known as the Craigslist murder. Tonight, Boston police have a man in custody in connection with the shooting death of a woman who advertised as a masseuse on Craigslist. She was found dead last Tuesday in a Boston hotel. So far, no charges have been filed. Up next, as students, they fled the attack on Columbine High School, but now they're back as teachers. Today is the 10th anniversary of the attacks at Columbine High School. The 13 victims were remembered at vigils in Littleton, Colorado. And as Mark Strassman reports, some of the survivors want to make sure the lessons of that terrible day are never forgotten.
Everyone around me got shot.
10 years ago today, Columbine became a killing field. Innocence was one of the casualties.
A student came in and said, there's somebody in the hall with a gun.
Everyone just took off.
Kind of heard girls screaming.
It was a massacre. 2 Columbine students, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, murdered 12 schoolmates and 1 teacher before killing themselves. Their motive still unclear.
I had no way to cope with that. No way at all.
No one did. These are 5 former students who fled that day and have returned as Columbine teachers.
I think we were all just crying messes for days.
Katie Tennyson and Mandy Cook were good friends on that dark day, which they remember kept getting worse.
Where is she? I don't see him. Why aren't they here? Everyone else is here. And then kind of realizing, I know why they're not here.
When you turn 16, you don't think about your school being shot up. You think about going to homecoming and think about prom and kid stuff. And after that day, my life totally changed.
After Columbine, they all decided 2 things. They wanted to teach.
I love what I do. I love my kids.
And they all loved Columbine.
Why was it important for you to teach here? I never really considered working anywhere else. If anything else ever happened in the school, from a fire drill to anything else, I wanted to be here for that.
Did you decide to come teach here because of what happened or despite what happened?
Both. to be that positive teacher that the students need and to say, this isn't going to keep me out of my high school.
And in hindsight, they're all struck by how brave their teachers were.
Could I be that strong for my kids?
Mandy Cook thought she could until a recent bomb scare.
I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to be 16 again and be scared and have people protect me. I didn't feel like I could protect my students.
She got through it. Now they all have to get through emotions stirred by this 10th anniversary and memories of the Columbine 13, their names etched in the school's new library. It's a tribute to lost innocence.
Why did that have to be my high school?
A tribute also reflected in the young faculty of Columbine High.
As teachers, lessons learned?
We use it as a teaching tool for a lot of things.
The humanity part of Columbine is what I try to bring to my kids, that do be kind to one another.
Accept everyone. Like, don't leave someone out. You never know, what's going to happen.
10 years later, the lesson the school teaches is the triumph of hope. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Littleton, Colorado.
And still so raw 10 years later. That is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.